You know, my own history is very eclectic because I grew up in New York City and I studied visual arts and filmmaking before I went into studying dance and performance, and then sort of wound up in the theater without knowing that I was going to end up in the theater. I had all these different kind of art interests that coalesced into the form of theater, which is a synthetic form. And also the other thing that's important is that I'm actually third generation in the theater. My grandfather, my father, all my uncles were in the Chinese opera, and my mother was a diva. So it's, even though I had never intended to go into the theater, I was going to go into filmmaking. When I did end up in theater, I was kind of went, well, this is fateful, you know, that would happen. So when I started out as a student, I was studying filmmaking and visual arts, and then when I graduated from that, that's when I started studying dance and performance in the New York avant-garde, which explains somewhat the variedness of my work, you know, the variety of my work, because I've worked in opera, I've worked in puppet theater, I've worked in regional theater, I've worked in community theater, you know, it's very diverse in terms of what I do, and I like that. I like the opportunity to do all these different kinds of performance forms. And the one form that I've been asked to do that never worked out because of my own schedule is, for example, to direct a 20-minute fashion show, which is actually one of the most difficult things to do, different than what it is. To me, that would be a very interesting challenge, how to pull off a fashion show. A 20-minute, because they're always 20 minutes on a runway. How do you do that, you know, for example? So that gives you some idea of where I'm coming from. The other thing that happened is that when I did go into studying dance and performance, I wound up in a dance performance company, which was the company of Meredith Monk, who's well known as a composer and filmmaker, et cetera, at a time in New York when theatrical forms were being challenged and questioned. So that's the climate in which I actually came out of. So my work often is in the theater field is often seen as very choreographic because of my roots in movement, in kinesthetics, you know, and in film. And in fact, at the very beginning of my career, which was when I started in the field of performance and theater, was around '72, that from the very beginning I was pioneering the use of sound, of recorded sound and microphones and so on, way before most people were doing it in the theater, simply because it came out of film, and film sound is actually 50% of the impact. So it's not Throne of Blood is something I've known because of my interest in film, which has been a lifetime interest. And when I was starting out in the avant-garde in New York, that was also the time of the great international filmmakers like Kurosawa. So I knew about Kurosawa for a very long time, and I've loved that film. And when Bill invited me to do Throne of Blood, every person I spoke to said, "I love that film." And I think the other thing is, for Oregon Shakespeare, it's a natural, because it is regarded by most people as one of the great adaptations of Shakespeare, even though there's not a single line of Shakespeare in it, but in terms of the spirit of what Shakespeare is. And it's actually not that odd, because Kurosawa has had a great interest in Shakespeare anyway. But the interesting thing is that when he did make Throne of Blood, he actually didn't refer to Macbeth at all. He already seen it, or had seen Macbeth and had read Macbeth, but he actually didn't go back to look at the material. So, and also because I'm an interdisciplinary artist, in the sense that I came from dance and I came from film and I came from theater and visual arts. All of these elements is what makes my work particular and distinctive, is because I come from all these different disciplines and am comfortable in all these different disciplines. That's why coming to Throne of Blood is not a kind of wonderful thing, because it's a project I've been interested in staging for a very long time. And also, Kurosawa's Throne of Blood is extremely theatrical, because he himself was so interested in the traditional Japanese theater form of no. And if you see many of his films, he works with an ensemble company often. You see many of the same actors in his films, sometimes in very small roles, and in the next film in a major role, you know. And so all of this was very, very meaningful to me to bring together.